As far as the language goes, Malay is a 6-week program, and as far as I know, last time I checked, it's still 6 weeks. I know like Spanish is 6 weeks, or at least I think it is, hopefully. And then other languages are longer, like 9 weeks, 12 weeks. And so for me, I remember distinctly the first whole month in the mission, I didn't understand anyone, even the little child. I was just thinking like, oh no, I can't even understand a child, and that was really hard for me because. For me particularly, I don't think most people will have this issue, especially if you're white. But for me, because I thought I was one of them, they would just speak as fast. But for a lot of the American missionaries, they would speak a little slower, slightly slow. Like you couldn't tell it at the beginning of your mission, but later, as you get used to it, you'd recognize they would speak slightly. Like, say, like they speak at on a scale of 1 to 10. Most of the time, they'll speak like a 7 or 8. But if they knew you were American, they'd speak like if they're speaking an 8, they go down to like a 7, 6 at the most. And so that was something for me that was a real struggle, is that they spoke at the regular speed and just like, oh, he knows. Like even if I told them, like I remember in the one area I was in, that even at the end of the 6 months, a lot of the members like, no, you're not from Kansas or America. Like it's like, we don't believe you. That's just a joke. You're playing a joke. Like you're really from here. Like it's okay. You can be honest. Like you're just embarrassed because you're not one of our tribes. And so. In comparison, and so like they were like with the Native American tribes, you know, where you have different ones, they had in essence different, you know, tribes over there, and so they'd be like, oh, it's okay if you're not Badayu, it's okay, we still love you, like type of that's how they would treat me. But with that, and so for me, I remember after that first month, because I tried really hard to learn the language, and it comes. That's my advice. Like most people you hear who learn a language, is it comes. You just have to put in the work, and that for me it took a whole month. I knew some people who were pretty good within that first month to 6 months, and I remember after the first month it just clicked. Like a lot of it just came from what you learn because you retain it, and so for me, I just remember being so happy. I was like, okay, I can do this. After the first month, I remember thinking like, it's not the end of the world that I can only understand maybe like a third of the conversation now. And for me, that was like, I really felt great that I could understand like a third of a conversation after living there for a whole month. And so by the time I was at the end of it, I remember the member even said to me, he's like, oh, like, it's like, you know, Watson, like when we speak to you now, it's, we can actually understand you, and we don't have to like just ask you like, what are you saying? Like you used the wrong word, like clearly in this sentence. And so that's something I would say is that the language is possible, especially if you read the Book of Mormon or learning from the children. That's always the best, or at least one of my favorites.
Another neat little tidbit about the language, it's kind of interesting and unique to Malaysia and maybe to Asia in general, is there's several different ways to say the word you. Like you're going to the store, or you're going to do this. Malaysia traditionally had kind of a very structured, I don't want to say caste system, but you know, there's different segments of society, and so the word you use when addressing your grandfather is different than the word for you that you use when you're talking to your friend. And so yeah, when I was in Malaysia, I was counting, I think I counted like 7 different ways to say the word you. There's like kamu, there's mu, there's engkau, kau, anda, beliau. Sometimes they just borrow the English word you, because they'll say, oh, you nak pergi mana? You know, they'll put that in there because in English, we only have one word for the word you, and we don't really think too much about using it. You know, I use the same you when I'm talking to my grandfather, my brother, my cousin, and so sometimes they borrow that English word and use it in Malay so that they can avoid using a Malay word for you, which might carry an awkward social connotation, or might have, might not be very comfortable for them to use. So there's lots of different ways to say you. So one thing that missionaries try to learn pretty quickly when they get there is kind of the different forms of you, when it's appropriate to use each one. And so that's kind of a neat thing about the language. It's good to know in advance.
My mission call is called to speak Indonesian. When we got there, it's Malaysia. They speak Malay. So Malay and Indonesian are like 70% the same. And so sometimes you'd actually be speaking Indonesian and not know it to a Malay. And they would understand you. And then sometimes you'd be speaking Malay to an Indonesian. They would understand you. You'd be just using different words. And it's really kind of hard to tell without someone telling you, oh, that's what they would say in Indonesian, to differentiate between the two languages. So whatever area you're in, if you're speaking the same way they are, that's basically the language. Like, I remember I was talking to a Malay lady who I thought was Malay. She was actually Indonesian, and I had asked her, "Kamu berasal dari mana?" So that's like, where are you from? And she told me, she's like, we don't use berasal. Like, we don't say originate. We just say "Kamu dari mana?" Like, where are you from? And so that, like, you get little things like that, and it doesn't make much of a difference. They'll still understand what you're trying to get at. You don't have to use complete sentences. The language there is, if you translate it directly, it's kind of like a caveman speech. You go here, or I want to go here. It's not, you don't have to conjugate a whole lot of stuff. So it's an easy language to get by with. They have slang like everyone does. And it'd be useful sometimes to, like, there's some slang words that you don't want to get on, but you can always build up a kind of a bond if you can, get on that same page as the slang, and be like, you're trying, you can actually build some sort of relationship with them if you, they like you more anyway, if you can kind of squeeze in on just a little bit of slang, so it's kind of fun that way.